Hello, my name is Ivan. You know me from my Better Call Ivan podcast, and today is the first episode of my new show, I Know a Guy. Today, the guy who I know is Gabriel Krauze. He is English, brilliant writer, brilliant author. His book, Whose They was nominated on the shortlist of Booker's Prize, and now he's preparing the second book for you. And he came to Ukraine to talk to me and to do some artistic, pure artistic performance. So, Gabriel, I know that you've been to the Her Majesty prison. You had some problems with the law back there in Great Britain. Without telling the stories, our listeners should read in your book.
Of course.
So they should definitely buy your book by who they was
Of course.
and read it. Can you please tell us how come you were involved into this world of breaking the law, unlawful activities, and stuff like that?
Well, my novel, Who They Was, is an autobiographical novel, and it's an account of growing up in the gang culture of Northwest London. And I say Northwest London partly because that's the area of London that I'm from. That's the area of London where I got involved in these things, but also because every area of London has like a distinctive identity of its own and also a distinctive gang culture of its own. But just to add as well, before I get into those specifics relating to how I got into that life or into that world, my novel isn't just a sensationalist account of a real life lived. It's also a philosophical exploration of how morality is relative to the level of danger in which you live. It's about how young men thrive in danger on the edge, and it's also about a kind of investigation or existential kind of journey through a sort of Nietzschean morality and a kind of Nietzschean following of instinct. But how I got into that is like difficult to explain in certain ways, because in a way, when it comes to that type of gang culture, which is very specifically related to street culture, related to areas, related to what we call postcodes, which is like depending on which area you live in, you have a postcode. And what I grew up in was the period of gang culture called by the media, it was called the postcode wars. Like we never called it that, but it was, the media labeled it postcode wars because it was about postcodes warring against each other. And that has developed over time into certain gangs belonging to postcodes carrying on these wars, and there's a whole new generation doing it. And then the style in which gangs called themselves or named themselves changed as well and evolved, but it all started actually before my generation. So this was something from before. And the way in which people get involved in that lifestyle and in that world is often that you kind of fall into it. You don't wake up one morning and decide, I want to be a gang member, I want to join a gang, because you can't. Sometimes it's formed out of groups of friends in an area from an estate. They try to make money in certain ways. You know, somebody in the group of friends sells drugs, somebody else commits burglaries, somebody else might do robberies or whatever, and you start to make money as a team. And then you end up having rivalries with other areas. And the rivalries are quite interesting in London because often gang wars are portrayed as being over drug turfs or over an area where you sell drugs. And those are real, because sometimes you have two gangs from two different areas competing over a road or an area where there are a lot of addicts where you can make a lot of money. Yeah, and so therefore, you will end up basically having a rivalry with another gang because you want control of that area, because whoever wins is going to be the one who makes the most money, etc., etc. But other times, one thing which a lot of people are mistaken about is a lot of gang rivalries start from something where you might go to a club with a group of your friends, someone steps on someone's trainer, words are exchanged, someone feels disrespected, or someone tries to dance with someone's girl, and then boom, a fight breaks out. Then before you know it, someone gets stabbed, something happens, like people basically, you could say feelings get hurt or someone feels disrespected, and then before you know it, the next day after, or in the weeks coming after that initial incident, somebody then decides to take revenge, goes and stabs someone else from that group of friends, someone does a shooting, and you just end up with this escalation of a cycle of violence. And these are how those feuds happen. And for me, what happened, I would say, like, it's difficult for me to, for the sake of a podcast or for the sake of this conversation, to explain it in proper detail. But what I would say is I grew up in a context where to some extent, I think there were a dual kind of element to it, where there was, first of all, the force of who I was as an individual, and me being drawn to danger and me being drawn to risk and wanting to make money, seeing that my parents didn't necessarily have things that I wanted and couldn't give me the things that I wanted, and then me seeing from the area that I was in these older guys who were making money and had these materialistic things. And British society and London is a very materialistic culture because it's a very wealthy city. But in a very wealthy city like that, you have much stronger symbols of wealth and power and materialistic success. And when everything is measured, or rather when you're growing up, you believe that everything is measured on the basis of these materialistic things, you want to get those things and your parents aren't going to give them to you. So you realize you have to work out a way to get money yourself. And if you're around guys like that who are doing those things, and usually older guys, they either influence you simply by who they are and what you see, or sometimes they might even involve you. They'll ask you to work for them. It starts by, for example, older guys will tell you to hold a gun for them. Like, you'll be 14 years old, and because they know like 14-year-olds are less likely to get stopped by police, or 14-year-olds are not going to have police come into their flat. So you'll get a guy who's 18, 19, sometimes in his 20s, giving a guy who's 14 a gun and being like, hold this for me. Or he'll tell him to hold drugs for him, or they'll employ them to sell drugs or deliver, or start off doing deliveries of drugs. And then before you know it, you've got one foot in that world, and everything is a gradual, it's like a ladder that you're climbing constantly into that. And I ended up getting into various things, I would say, like, just to give it in the briefest way possible. It was like, you start off with like petty street robberies. You're robbing people for their phones, like, and this was like in early 2000, when, you know, a phone was like a valuable object to have.
Of course.
So you start off by robbing people. You know, you pull out knives on people and take their phones. Then we were like burglaring houses, selling a bit of weed stuff, and then before you know it, you want more money. You start to get more serious. You know, you might rob jewelry shops, or you might rob rich people for jewelry, or you might rob drug dealers, or and you know, everything is goes in these stages, you know. And some guys are better at doing robberies, and some guys are really good at selling drugs, and that's become your lifestyle, and that's become the context of your life, is that lifestyle. And you spend your entire teenagehood in that lifestyle, which are your formative years. And then by the time you're 20 and in your 20s, that's the only way in which you know not just how to make money, but how to kind of where your place in society is. You only identify yourself within the context of being an outlaw, being outside of society. And it's not so much that you're a victim and you're like, oh, poor me, I'm outside of society. No, you're like, fuck society. You reject its constrictions, you reject the expectations of society.
So in Ukraine, we had this thing called a romantic prison subculture. You know, when becoming an outlaw and especially serving a term in prison was described as something romantic to young people, to young male people. Did you have something like that in Great Britain? Maybe it is about musical culture or something like this.
Yeah, not with prison culture, but like definitely the concept of the outlaw as a romantic figure in relation to music. So we had rap music and grime music, and now we have UK drill, and the lyrics of this all glorify, or maybe not I would say glorify. People say it glamorizes crime. It doesn't glamorize it, but it glorifies violence and it glorifies crime. And I know this because I was there when grime started, like in London, going to youth clubs, we were MCing, and no one at that time, grime was not a big music scene. No one outside of the hood in the UK, and especially the hood in London, because it came from London, knew about grime. So no one was doing this music thinking they're going to become rich and famous. You know, like rappers in America.
Of course.
In America, it's like everyone knew in the 90s or in the early 2000s that you could become very rich by being a rapper. If you become rich, you know, you become rich and famous and you make it out the hood.
Like catch the label and do the things for money.
Yeah. Whereas in London, it's like when we were doing grime, it was just a form of underground musical expression, which was actually very cool because it was like a genuinely authentic art form and a genuinely authentic artistic outlet, a form of expression and everything. But what I would say is, because people tried to demonize grime, like the media and police tried to demonize grime, and they would say that it either promoted gang rivalry or criminal culture, or they would say that it glorified it. I wouldn't say glamorized it. I wouldn't say that I glamorized it. There was certain maybe glorification, but the glorification was simply the sense of like owning the nihilism of our youth and owning the nihilism of that culture that we grew up in, and the poverty and the attraction to crime and the attraction to outlaw culture and the materialism, and kind of creating almost like creating a mythology for ourselves of the things that mattered, you know, different fashions, different ways of being, different ways of talking and everything. And so we had that within music. But I wouldn't say, the other thing is, I wouldn't say that that was a culture that necessarily attracted people into becoming criminals, but it was more like an encapsulation of our lives and criminality, because also don't forget there are a lot of MCs and rappers as well who don't live really the life that they rap about. Like it's a lot of them, in fact, a lot of the guys who are the best lyricists exaggerate their lives, and a lot of the guys who are the most real gangsters are actually really shit at rapping. Like, you know what I mean? So it's like there's this duality. Of course there are some guys who really live that life and are very good rappers and MCs and whatever, but there's this duality. But what I would say is that music is both an expression of that world by people who exist in that world, and it's also like it's a call to that world in the sense of like it's an expression of that world that isn't ashamed of the world, and it also doesn't reject that world. It doesn't say this world is so terrible. It's more like, yeah, like we're doing crazy shit, stabbing people, shooting people, robbing people, making money, selling drugs, and that's our world. And in a way we're proud of it, because, you know, I can say this, it's like when I lived in South Kilburn, I lived in this area of northwest London that was notorious, but I would say me and my friends were proud to be from an area that was known to be dangerous, and to be proud from an area that other people were afraid of. Like sometimes you'd be living in that area and you'd see shit around you and you'd think, oh, this is really shit and fucked up and I want to get out of here. But other times when you'd be outside of it and people would hear where you were from and they'd be afraid of it, or they'd know about your area, it's like you'd be proud to be from there. So there's this duality to it. But I don't think we had the similar culture of that glamorization of prison culture. You know, like prison was seen simply as a rite of passage. So the first time I went to prison, I went to a Young Offenders Institute, and which is for guys who are 20 years under, basically.
Under 20? Okay.
20 years under. So it's like the oldest people in Young Offenders Institute are 20 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, and I believe they're separated. This is like a while ago, so I'm going to be making an effort to remember things, but I believe it's separated into, at least Feltham, where I was, which is one of the most notorious Young Offenders Institute, it's separated into 14 to 17-year-olds and 18 to 20-year-olds.
Like minors and
yeah, because you can't have 14-year-olds with 20-year-olds, because there'd be way too much victimization in that situation. You know what I mean? So because it's Young Offenders is a very violent atmosphere, and that's like a big difference between adult prison and Young Offenders. Is in adult prison, of course, there's serious violence in adult prison, but in Young Offenders Institute, it's like way more wild. It's like really there's like just non-stop violence basically in that environment, and it's very uncontrolled. Whereas in an adult prison, because there's also like a much stronger drug trade as well in an adult prison, and there's a hierarchy as well of people, of gangsters, of gangs, etc. Things are much more controlled, because you can't just be causing problems on the wing or in prison, and there aren't going to be repercussions for your behavior.
Yeah, because this business.
Exactly.
Of this business.
Exactly.
Speaking about the language, the proper gangster language, like in Ukraine, due to this romantic prison subculture, our young gangsters use mostly the prison slang, the special prison slang, like used in prison to fool cops and do the dark business, you know, behind their backs. But most people think that the gangster language in London is still Cockney, you know, coming from the old movies,
like
old films.
They watch Snatch and they think we talk like
yes,
Snatch and
yes, exactly.
No,
what
bullshit.
can you say about the language? How has it changed?
No, it's like, first of all, we don't have like a prison language, so that's like a very unique Ukrainian and Russian thing. Like I think. And maybe as well, I think there's something equivalent in Poland, but I'm not 100% sure. But maybe it's like a Soviet, like,
post-Russian Empire, I would say.
Okay,
like,
post-Russian
Empire. Poland was part of Russian Empire by sometimes. So
Okay,
it's
so
past Russian Empire.
yeah, so I don't know.
Russian influence.
I'm not an
basically.
expert on this. I mean, I know a little bit about Vodev,
Mhm.
Zakonia and stuff like
Yes,
that. But
yes.
yeah.
This is that stuff.
Okay,
that,
so
prison subculture.
yeah. So we don't have that in the UK. Like first of all, it's like the way we talk. It's not. I wouldn't even say it's like a gangster language or a criminal slang.
Mhm.
Although other members of society would consider the way that we speak a kind of criminal sub language or a criminal like lingua franca in a way.
Mhm.
But no, we just speak slang. We just speak, and for me, it's like we speak London slang.
Mhm.
And there are some differences between slang from if you're from South London, if you're from Northwest London, if you're from East London, and there's differences of accents with certain things, but there are subtle little differences in it. But we speak a slang that is influenced by the multiculturalism of London. And so there's a lot of Jamaican influence, like influence of words taken from Jamaican patois. There's influence from Cockney, of course, because Cockney was the original basis for kind of working class and criminal slang. And then, of course, the language it's a very interesting thing actually for me linguistically or etymologically because there's this weird unspoken agreement. Like no one's ever written a dictionary of this slang, but there is this understanding among all young people and all people from these areas that this is how you talk, and everyone absorbs it and everyone learns it. And I'm right now, for the sake of this interview, I'm making an effort. And like, for example, when I come to Ukraine and I speak English with people as well, I make an effort not to use slang because of course people won't understand it. If I were to speak to people here the way that I speak with my boys when I'm not thinking and I just like relax, it would be semi-incomprehensible because we use like mad words that don't make sense to anybody and that to English people don't make sense. So when my book came out, my book Who They Was, my novel Who They Was is written in slang. Although I toned it down, I didn't write it in exactly as slanged out a way as we talk, but it's very realistic in terms of that language. Even English people had trouble reading it and had a problem with like struggled with understanding it. Although of course if you commit to reading it you start to understand what some of the words are. But even certain times I would speak to people who don't speak like that, who are not from the same world, and I'd realize that they'd misunderstood a couple of slang terms in it because they just don't know that language. And it's funny as well because there are also generally expected spellings for these slang words, which again don't exist in a dictionary. So how did it happen that when everyone texts and when everyone sends messages, they use the same spelling for these words? It's a very interesting thing in it. But yeah, so it's again, there's a big difference between our culture and your culture in the sense that so you have this influence of the prison culture that like a lot of young guys idealize. We don't. We have forms of music that are expressions of our subculture and our criminal culture, and some people are attracted to it because of the music, but also half of the time the music is just an expression of the reality. And then the government demonizes it and everything, but whatever, that's like another story. And then in the same way, our language doesn't come from the prisons. Our language comes from the streets. That's where our language comes from. And of course, every now and again, there are some words which maybe come out of prison culture, but I can give like one example, which is that like tobacco, for example, for cigarette is called tobacco, and the slang, maybe not slang, but the like colloquialism that people would use for tobacco in a normal context would be baki. You know,
Baki,
tobacco,
they
so you call it baki. But if you're in prison, you call it burn. And so if someone says like, oh, have you got burn, or give me some burn, it means probably, not always, but it means probably that they've been to prison, because that word comes from prison. But like in the UK, you have three different categories. In fact, you have 4 different categories. So you have Cat A, which is high security, and within Cat A, you have some even more high security within that, but I don't know much about that. But it's for like terrorists and for like really, really problematic prisoners who even within the prison system cause huge problems. So you have Cat A, which is the highest security, most dangerous prisons. Then you have Cat B, which is like just one step lower. And you have Cat C, which is like basically prisoners who are like not considered so much a danger, and also have the potential to, through good behavior, like get out of prison relatively soon, or or they're prisoners who've done a long sentence and they're coming to the end of their sentence. And usually you have Cat B, Cat C together in one prison. You have like Cat B, Cat C prison. Cat A prisons are one thing all of their own. And then the fourth category, which is like an interesting phenomenon, is you have what's called an open prison. And an open prison is for people either at the very end of their sentence or who've committed like, well, yeah, I think it's generally actually people, I don't want to make any mistakes about this because somebody will know better than me and maybe they'll say that I'm making this up, yeah. But I do know that with open prisons, it's like you can be in an open prison when you're very close to the end of your sentence. And from what I understand with an open prison, you basically, there's like a certain responsibility that you have not to escape, because you could walk out of it. Like, yeah, you're not behind the barbed wire and shit. And it's got a way more relaxed regime, basically. And it's for people to kind of, you're put in there very much towards the end of your sentence, and it's part of you demonstrating that you're ready to be introduced to society. Oh, and when you're in an open prison, you can get day release, which is where you're allowed to leave prison for like a day, or you can even go and do a job. Like you can, I think there are some jobs that people in open prisons are allowed to do. So yeah, again, I'm not an expert on this, so like please don't take my word as like the gospel, because I was never in an open prison, for example. But again, I know people who were in open prisons when they came to the end of their sentence, and I believe that's roughly how that system works.
Okay, got it. If you want to dive into the awesome experience of Gabriel Krauze, please subscribe to his Instagram. You'll find more news about his new books and his new adventures in this Instagram. Also, please, if you want to get some new like things about Ukrainian law system and Ukrainian legislation, subscribe to my Telegram channel and to my Instagram channel. That would be bang. Bam. Can you remember your first encounter with the police? Like the first serious one, I mean, which had consequences for you?
I can remember the first time I got arrested properly, like, and got taken to a police station and got put in the cell, and my dad had to come and get me because I was 14 years old, I believe.
Okay.
And I was stealing VHS tapes, you know, like we used to watch films on VHS tapes.
I'll place a picture of VHS tape for Zoomers right now.
Yeah. So I was stealing VHS tapes. I was really into film, and obviously my mum and dad wouldn't let me watch all the gangster films that were, you know, very violent and hardcore and all that shit. So there was like a shop that would sell CDs and VHS tapes, and I used to go there and I used to put like several, like 2, sometimes 4 under my top and walk out. And then one day I went to this shop. I was really good at it. Like I amassed a huge collection of VHS tapes, and I used to watch these films whenever I could. And it's funny because I was watching gangster films, like pretty much all of the films were crime films. And then one day I went to the same shop. It was like a proper shop in the shopping mall, and I noticed that the entire VHS tape section had been moved to be right underneath the CCTV cameras. But something in my head was like, have they moved it because of me? Because I used to do this regularly, you know, like a couple of times a week or something. But at the same time in my head, I was like, nah, it can't be because of me. They've just changed the layout of the shop. So I go, I look at VHS tapes, and I put 4 underneath my top, and I go to come out of the shop, and I get stopped by the security guard. And I remember that the security guard was called Hannibal, and he was like really sympathetic. Yeah, he was a black guy called Hannibal, and he was actually quite sympathetic to me. But he like stopped me, and like the manager of the store refused to. They took me into some room, and the manager of the store refused to like just let me go for me giving the tapes back, and they called the police, and the police arrested me, and I got taken to a police station. And because I was 14, I couldn't answer questions, do the police interview on my own. I had to wait for an adult to be present. So my dad came, and then there was like a solicitor who came and represented me. And basically, because I was 14 years old and it was my first charge, they gave me what's called a caution. So it's like it goes on your record, and it's basically an official thing that basically you committed a crime, but we're not going to take you through the court system now, and we're not going to officially charge you through the court system. You've acknowledged that you committed a crime, and for me it was like I can't not acknowledge it because I was caught in the act of committing the crime. It was on CCTV.
Yeah, of course.
Like, so there's nothing to discuss basically about that. And the caution, basically, they offer you as well a caution at that stage. Sometimes, or in those cases, you are offered to take a caution, which means you get a police record, but at the same time, you don't get taken to court. Because when you get taken to court, there's the possibility you'll be sentenced or you'll be fined. And so you avoid getting fined, you avoid getting sentenced, you simply take the caution, it goes on your police record. And that was the beginning. Yeah, and with something like what I did, obviously if I went to court, I would not have gone to prison for that because it's too much of a minor offense for someone who's 14 years old and it's their first crime, stealing VHS tapes. You're not going to prison in the UK for that. Definitely not. First time, no way. But I may have had to do either community service, which would mean having to go to like these sessions for hours, or I'd have had to pay a fine, or maybe the combination of both. And by taking a caution, you avoid that. But then other people would see this negatively. Me personally, I was like, fuck it, it's like minor to me. It was minor, but other people would see it as like, fuck, you've got a criminal record now. Whereas to me, I was like, yeah, I've got a criminal record, so fucking what? I at that stage in my life, I was like, oh, well, that's kind of like normal because of people around me. I was like, oh, well, it's normal to have a criminal record. Obviously for my dad who came to pick me up from the police station, it was a huge shame. Like it was a real like shame for the family, you know, that like his 14-year-old son got arrested and has a criminal record, you know. So because I was the only person in my family who was getting involved in this kind of shit. My parents were good people, hardworking Polish immigrants, you know, like my twin brother was practicing the violin, innit? And then I was going and doing all this fuckery, innit? So yeah.
So is the police violence bad in the UK?
I mean, it's like, I don't think it's like a lot of other countries, and I think everything is relative, of course, but put it like this, it's like at first you think that there isn't, maybe when you're first coming into contact, you think police violence isn't that bad. When I say police violence isn't that bad, what I mean is if you see a bunch of activists at a protest getting pushed by police in London, those activists who are generally soft people, mentally soft people, and people who are obsessed with victimhood culture and want to always see themselves as victims, they'll be like, oh my God, it was police brutality, da, 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 da. But it's like, no, police brutality is getting charged by riot police with batons and getting beaten when you're lying on the ground. That's police brutality. Like, and the problem is people in the West, and especially people in the UK, are quite soft and they don't understand how lucky they are in comparison to other countries. It doesn't mean that the police are perfect by any means, but what I mean is I have a self-awareness and an objective awareness of how things are in other parts of the world that makes me understand that, okay, on the surface, police brutality in the UK is not such a big problem as it is in other countries. At the same time, when you do experience getting beaten up by a police officer for the first time in London, let's say, for example, because you're a gang member and they know you're not going to go and like lodge a formal complaint, or they'll assume, they'll make a judgment that you're not connected to powerful people, or you don't have lawyers in your family, you don't have, they may like decide to take you into the van and turn the lights off and like while your hands are cuffed behind your back, start beating the shit out of you. That's happened to me. Like, and when that happens the first time, it's like, it's a shock and you're scared, because it's like, I remember the first time it happened to me where I was in the back of a police van and me and my friend had been arrested in northwest London, and I got taken into the back of a police van because I was kind of trying to struggle with the police, and I was also telling him that like no one loves him, and that the only people who would ever care about him are his fellow pigs, and only pigs like him like will associate with him, and his wife is married to a pig, and his kids are the kids of a pig, and I was just going on like this, yeah, like, and I was like, you'll never amount to anything but being a pig, and all this, and I was like going on, and the guy was like, right, fuck it, and he took me into the back of the van, switched off the lights, and I remember I had my hands cuffed behind my back, and he took my hoodie and like tied it really tight around my face, and then just like grabbed my head and smashed it against the window. But it's like in the police vans, it's not glass in it, it's like some hard plastic. So it smashed my face against it, and then just started punching me in the head and face. And like I was obviously, trying to put my head down to protect my face. And I remember being like, oh fuck, I'm getting beaten up by a cop. Like, yo, shit, I didn't think they were gonna go that far. Because it's like, you associate the image of police brutality more with like, I don't know, America or Russia, or like you don't think in Britain, which is like has this veneer, and it's something, of course, this was when I was very young, so you are naive about certain things, and Britain has this veneer of being very proper, and in some ways it is compared to certain countries, but in other respects you're like, oh, that's just the surface level, and when you dig a bit deeper you find that all sorts of things happen. And I know about, like, one of my friends once knocked a police officer out on Kilburn High Street, who tried to arrest him, and he just knocked him out. He just banged him in the face, knocked him out, and ran back to South Kilburn, and he was hiding in one block because he knew that the police might be able to identify him, and then they'd come to his mum's block, so he was hiding in this block. But the police worked out what block he'd gone into, and when they went into that block, they fucked him up and knocked him out, obviously, and got him back and just left it. It's like, because they just got him back for what he'd done, but there was nothing official, So yeah, I would say, like, I mean, there are elements. It also depends because, for me, it's like, having grown up in that gang culture and in that world, it's like we didn't expect the police to treat us kindly, right?
Of course.
The police are our enemy. So I find it also very funny when I see like a liberal activist being pushed to the ground by a riot policeman at a like protest, going, oh my God, police brutality, like, oh my God. And it's like, yo, you don't know, like you've never had the shit beaten out of you actually by police, so like you don't know what that is, innit? And it's funny, I understand it though as well, because they're like people who live safe lives, and therefore they expect things to operate within the boundary of rules, and they expect the rules to serve them, because
of
they
course.
see themselves as the most important people, and they see everything in the state. They have this illusion as well that everything about the state is supposed to serve them, and they have delusions, like idealistic and utopian delusions about society. Whereas one thing I would say is like a kind of benefit about being immersed in gang culture and criminality is a lot of the illusions of the safety of society melt away, because you start to exist in a world that is very dangerous and full of threat. And then in a way, it's like, I do actually think it's a good thing personally, even though some people would see it as negative. Like, I do think it's a good thing that I lost those illusions about, society being able to protect me, and I gained that understanding that, having to protect myself is a skill that I have to have, and is something that I have to do myself, and don't kid yourself that the world is a nice and soft and easy place, because it's not, innit?
So you told me this story recently about undercover cops trying to torture you.
Oh,
you
shit.
tell it?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say
Is
they
it
tried
okay?
to torture me. They didn't try to torture me. What happened was, I was with a friend in Northwest London, and it was like, okay, so it's in this postcode, I referred earlier to postcode wars, innit? And we were in this postcode called NW10, and NW10 at that time, I don't know exactly about now, although I'm sure it is like this now as well, but NW10 at that time was known for having what we would call greasy undercovers. Greasy is a slang term for like being really fucking raw and rough and like, ready for violence. And the undercovers there were known for being the kind of people who would not play by any rules of, what is legal and what isn't legal. And yeah, if you get stopped by Northwest NW10 undercovers, it's like you're gonna have some problems. Anyway, these, I don't remember, because again, this happened like quite a long time ago, but these two cops jump out. No, it was 3 cops jump out on us, and they stop us, and they want to stop and search us, and they stop and search us in this really rough and aggressive way. They're like kind of grabbing us. I think they like grabbed my friend by the throat and like slammed him against the wall, and then they're like searching him, and they're searching me. And I think I started doing that thing again of like telling them that they're nobodies, and that their wives don't love them, like, and that their mothers are ashamed that they came out of them, and all this stuff. And they start, like, I remember they start being like super violent with me, and like they were like picking me up and like slamming me on the ground. And like, I can't remember the exact details of it, but a crowd, the way they weren't beating me, but they were like choking me and like twisting me up and slamming me on the ground. And a crowd of people actually formed, I remember, in the middle of the street, and were telling them like, yo, you can't do that shit. Like, yo, stop treating him like that. Because I think I was only like 17 at the time or something. And I was like skinny as well. And these are like 3 grown men and everything. And I remember that one of the cops grabbed my head, and there were these black railings, and he jammed my head in between the railings, but the railings were like way more narrow than my face. And I remember feeling this pressure on either side of my head from the railings. And I was like scared, because I was like, fuck, it feels like my skull's getting like pressed, and you know, it's like, is my skull strong enough to resist? I was like scared. And then because the crowd formed around them, one of them was like going, he's got needles, implying that I have needles in my pocket, like I'm a junkie, or like a lot of like heroin addicts, like what we call nitties. Our slang for them is nitties, but for the sake of our viewers, I'm trying to like talk more clearly or in a more comprehensible standard English. But what junkies have, you know, where they have needles in their pockets. They were trying to imply that they'd tried to search me. I hadn't told them I had needles. Maybe one of them had like, you know, cut himself or pricked himself, which would be obviously very dangerous. And they were trying to do this to like put the crowd off, because the crowd could see the way they were treating me was like they were going over the top. And then what they did a very strange thing, is they like grabbed me. They just completely forgot about my friend. And there was this one cop in particular who was like, he was the one who jammed my head into the railing. And he was like, right, we're taking him. And they put me into a car. I think it was a van, but it was like unmarked, basically. They put me into the car and they drove me to this police station. And they took me to this police station, and it was a very weird thing, because they took me through, they parked in a car park of the police station, and they took me through the back of the police station, and there was no check-in desk, there was no desk sergeant, there were no lights on. And it was like, I was thinking, this is weird, because when you get booked into a police station, when you get arrested, you have to go first to the desk sergeant. They search you, they write down all the things that you have on you, they take all your property, they take your height, like they take your fingerprints, like, or whatever, like, and there's a whole procedure basically. And I knew by this time, I'd been arrested so many times that I knew the procedure well. And I was like, this is fucking weird. And I was like, why are the lights not on? And then they just take me into this random room, like an interview room, and it's like empty. And then this one cop starts like threatening me, like threatening to beat me up. And then he's like, jump up and down. And so like, I jump up and down because I'm scared. And then he's like, pull your trousers down and jump. He's like, pull your tracksuit down and jump up and down. And I'm like kind of scared, and I hesitate. And he's like, fucking pull it, you know, like fucking pull your trousers down. So I'm like, okay, like, I'm pull my tracksuit bottoms down, and I like jump up and down. And it's like some humiliation ritual or something. Like, and then he's like, now pull your fucking boxes down. Like, and at that point, his friends, I remember like one of the other cops going, nah, John, nah. Like, calm down, John. And I think he grabbed me and was like choking me. And he was like, because first I was like, nah, fuck that. And he was choking me, and he was like, I said, fucking pull your boxes down. And then his friend was like, nah, John, nah, calm down. And then I remember one of the other cops quickly took me, like grabbed me, pulled me outside of the room, took me to the back, opened the door, and he was like, fuck off. And I just like went out into this car park, like, and I was like dazed. And I was like, what the fuck just happened? And I phoned my boy, and I was like, bro, where are you? And he was like, oh, I'm waiting for you still. I'm in Willesden, which is like the spot where they jumped out on us, and I went to join him. And I was like, yo, what the fuck was that? Because it was very strange. Years later, I was having a conversation with a friend of mine, and he was telling me, we were talking about some mad shit that had happened and like stuff to do with cops and stuff. And I mentioned this story to him. And he goes, wait, was this police station in, and I can't remember, but he said the name of the road in the exact area, which I remembered. And I was like, yeah, it was. And he goes, yo, that's the police station where my cousin died. And he's like, the cops killed my cousin. Like they, you know, probably bent him up in a certain way, kneeled on his back or something, and he choked to death. Like, which can happen, you know, if you put too much weight on someone's back and everything, and compress their lungs.
Yeah,
and
you can breathe.
Yeah, and his death was like declared like like he died of a heart attack or some shit, you know, which no police officers got in trouble for it. And then this friend of mine said, yeah, that police station. It's not an active police station. It's an abandoned police station, but it's known for being used by undercovers, that they take certain guys there and like beat the shit out of them or like interrogate them or whatever. And the thing is, right, is like it's in thinking about it objectively now, it's not that bad. I always think about measuring it against more extreme things that I've heard of and more extreme things that have happened to other people. And so objectively, I'm like, it's not that bad. Of course, to a person who's never been through an experience like that, or who's never been in that world of criminality and cops treating criminals differently to how they would a normal member of society, it's fucking shocking. But to me, I was shocked as well by it. And I remember for me, the bit that was shocking was not so much the treatment, it was the moment when the other cop grabbed the guy and was like, nah, John, like, calm down, John. Because for him to say that, I realized, oh, something really wrong is about to happen here. And they can see that their friend has gone too far and is losing control, like, and something bad could have happened to me. So that was fucking mad. But look, bro, it's like I said in the beginning, innit? It's like when we were in that world and living in that world, it's like we had no illusions that the cops are our enemies. Like, so we don't expect anything more from them. And I actually remember one of the bosses of South Kilburn, because South Kilburn had this one gang that controlled it that was very, very powerful. At one point in the 2000s, they went to war with with the Yardis, who were like the Jamaican gangsters who'd literally come from Jamaica and were trying to take over. And this gang in South Kilburn went to war with them and they won the war. Like, there were lots of shootings and shit, and they won, and then they made loads of money. But it was very interesting. And then later they ended up getting into a war with another area, and a lot of people lost their lives like through that, and it's very tragic, like people that I knew and shit like that. And I remember when who's like the boss of South Kilburn, that name will have to get taken out or like beeped out.
I'll people
like when this guy who was the boss of South Kilburn was doing an interview once about this, and he said this thing where he said, in the beginning, we didn't start this whole thing to make money. We weren't a gang like to have a war with another gang. Our enemy wasn't the other area, which is Mozart. Like, they weren't our enemy. Like, the enemy was the police, and we just wanted to make money. And it was later when things escalated, because, and again, things escalated due to that combination of things that I told you about, which is like disrespect. Disrespect was one of the biggest things. You go clubbing with all your boys from one area to one club. There's a whole bunch of guys from another area in the same club. A fight breaks out. Someone gets stabbed. Someone gets slapped. Someone gets bottled. Like, someone gets stomped out or whatever. And then before you know it, you have a gang war.
So, what's your experience of being convicted? How just it happens in the UK when you are taken to the court by the police and the prosecutor? And can you describe this process from your perspective?
Yeah, like, funnily enough, so when I went to adult prison, it was like very weird because it was actually on a technicality. So I didn't get convicted, although the process, I guess, that I went through was somewhat similar to processes that people who've been convicted are. What happened? So I had a case for ABH, which is assault, actual bodily harm. So it's like there's ABH and GBH. GBH stands for grievous bodily harm. Grievous bodily harm is if you stab someone or if you like really badly like injure them. ABH is like, I just beat up some guy. I had a fight in Liverpool Street Tube Station. It started on the train, then it spilled out onto the platform. I fucked up the guy and then got arrested. And what happened is the case took, I think it was more than a year that the case took to end up in Crown Court. And we have these two different court systems. We have Magistrate Court and we have Crown Court. Crown Court involves barristers and judges. So, as people know probably from TV or stuff like, or from just knowing about British culture, Crown Court involves barristers in black robes, black gowns with wigs on their heads. The judge wears a wig often. And yeah, in fact, the judge always wears a wig and the barristers wear wigs. And those barristers are called now KCs. Back then, they're QCs because QC stands for Queen's Counsel. Now, because the king is the head monarch, it's the King's Counsel. Sometimes you can get also what's called counsel, which is a type of solicitor who's hired and a solicitor who can represent you in a Crown Court. But they're not a KC or a QC. but they have a certain position which allows them to represent you in Crown Court. And the big differentiation of Crown Court as well is that you get a jury. You get a jury trial. Whereas in magistrates, there's no jury. You have a panel of 3 magistrates and they simply listen to your case, and sometimes there'll be like cross-examination between, and you're represented by a solicitor, not a barrister. And sometimes you'll have cross-examination by your solicitor and by a prosecutor, and someone will give evidence, but it's all just heard by the magistrates, and then the magistrates determine the sentence. And magistrates, for example, would never deal with like a shooting, for example. Like a shooting would automatically be a Crown Court case because it's much more serious. Whereas somebody who's like a prolific shoplifter and keeps stealing from a shop, or somebody who just assaulted a police officer, that will go to a magistrates. And then, for example, and this happened to me before, like if you go to a magistrate's court and you're charged with assaulting police and you plead not guilty, they automatically send that to the Crown Court.
Oh.
Yeah, because they'll decide, well, because it's assaulting police and you've pleaded not guilty, then actually this needs to go to trial, because now you need to have a trial, and you can't have a trial in a magistrate's court. Like
something like a filter, yeah, for the Crown Court in this matter, in this
yeah.
matter.
It filters things out. Magistrate's court, in that sense, filters things out to something. Yeah. But anyway, so what happened to me in my particular case was, so I had this case. It had been going on for a year, or maybe more than a year, for it to get to the first hearing. And so what happened is I went to court. It was in Southwark Crown Court in South London, and I'm there with my barrister, and the judge comes into the courtroom. A jury hasn't been sworn in at the moment, because a jury also only comes into play if you plead not guilty to a charge. And if you plead not guilty to a charge, the judge will decide, okay, we need a jury for this trial, and etc., etc. So it starts with you just having the first hearing with the judge, and the judge looks at the papers and says, wow, this has taken like a year to come to court. And he's like, where's the witness? Where's the victim who's going to be the main witness for the prosecution?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
And the prosecutor says, oh, he couldn't make it in today. And the judge goes, well, in that case, if he doesn't come in today, I'm going to throw this out because it's taken too long. And I'm there in the dock, like, where the charged person is, thinking like, fucking yes, what? Banging, like, oh my days, like, it's that easy. It's taken a year, and because this guy decided that he couldn't show up for whatever reason, the whole thing is about to get thrown out of court. And I fucking did it. Like, I can say this, I don't care, innit? This, you don't need to blank out, like, of course I fucked this guy up. Like, it was very obvious, innit? Like, so the judge says, I'm gonna throw this out. Now, when the judge says he's going to throw a case out, that means that the case can't be retried, right? Especially for something like this where it's an ABH. I didn't kill anybody or anything, right? It can't get retried. So at that point, there's a member I can't remember the exact title, but there's someone in court who like deals with probation, right? And they're like the head of probation or whatever, and they're tied to the prosecution service and shit. And the head of probation at that point raises a complaint and says, like, Your Honor, basically, like, you're about to let him go, but he's violated the terms of his probation. Because I was on probation when I got into that fight for a different case. I was on probation, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think I was supposed to complete 220 hours of community service.
Okay, in the orange robe.
No, we don't do it like that. No, we don't do it like that. You go to probation, usually community service consists of you going to a place early in the morning somewhere, and for the whole day you like paint railings in a park. Like, but you don't have to wear, like, they don't make you wear some special outfit so that people can see. It's just sometimes you'll see in a park a weird group of young people, and then maybe there'll be like a couple older people in there, and they're all painting railings, or like they're all doing or they're clean, or maybe they'll be in a school cleaning like all the windows in the school, like some weird shit like that, innit? Or maybe not in a school, but like some public building, like, that's closed for the day, and you're just basically doing jobs for free as your punishment, innit? And the probation officer, again, this is like a while ago, so the probation officer says, he hasn't, not only has he not done his, not only did he not complete the terms of his probation of community service, but he broke the terms of probation by not going to his community service and refusing to attend it. And he stole a probation officer's phone and smashed it, right? Which is true. Although I wouldn't say I stole her phone, I snatched it out of her hand and smashed it. And that's like another story. Basically, she wouldn't let me, during a lunch break or during a break, she wouldn't let me talk on the phone, but then she was letting other people talk on the phone. And I was like, fuck that. And like, so when I saw her taking her phone out to like check the time, I grabbed her phone and was like, yeah, I can't talk on the phone, boom, and just smashed it and then walked off. And I never came back to probation. But the judge very accurately said, first of all, he was like, wait, you're saying he stole the probation officer's phone, he grabbed the probation officer's phone and smashed it. He was like, so why is there no criminal charge for that?
Why is not in the files right now?
Why? He was like, why is it not on the files? Why is there not a criminal charge? Why were the police not called? There's no record of it. He's like, I'm not accepting that. So he just said to the probation officer, he said, I'm not accepting that at all. Like, because there's no record of that having happened apart from on your files. You noted it down, but you didn't call the police. So that doesn't count. But he looks at the record of community service that I was supposed to do and the terms of my probation. And he says, oh yeah, I can see he hasn't fulfilled it and he's broken it. And at that point he goes, well, based on the original charge that I got the community service for, I was supposed to get a 6-month sentence. And he goes, so I'm gonna have to sentence you, but it's late, it's the end of the day. So I'm gonna send you on, you're going to go to prison tonight on remand, which means you're waiting your sentencing, you're waiting for your trial or you're awaiting sentencing. I'm placing you on remand and tomorrow morning we'll reconvene again and you'll be brought back to court and I'll decide on your sentencing. So then what happens is you get taken downstairs into the basement of the courthouse and you get put in like a holding cell for a bit and then you get taken out and you get put on what's called a Serco van, or like it was Serco. Serco is the name of like a private security company that takes prisoners to prison, innit? And what they do is like, it's this van, it's this kind of like armored, like not armored van, but it's like this reinforced big van. And you sit in a box, like literally a box that is literally like a cube around you and you can't fully stand up and you're cuffed as well inside the box. Yeah, I believe you're cuffed inside the box because then when they take you off, you have to be taken off in cuffs. But I think you're cuffed with your hands in front of you in the box. And all they give you is, if you ask for water, they will put like a little tin of water through this little slot in the bottom and you can drink some water and they drive you to prison and the windows are tinted like this dark orange color so you can't really see, the world outside properly. And so they drive you to prison and then you arrive at the prison and by that point you're usually fucking tired, so you're like kind of happy to be arriving at the prison because you're like, I'm out of this fucking box because it's crazy to be in this little space. So it's nothing like, you know, in the American system where they have these prison buses where everyone's sitting next to each other like on a school bus and shit, but everyone's cuffed. No, in the British system everyone's isolated in a little cubicle. And then you arrive at the prison and you're booked in, so like you get fingerprinted again, you get issued an ID or you get issued your prison number, you get searched, your clothes get taken away and you get given clothes. Although when you're on remand, you get to keep your clothes because you haven't been sentenced yet as a prisoner. So you get to keep your clothes, but they take anything from you, you know, property you or whatever. Like, and then basically you're put in a holding cell with a bunch of other guys, like, and then you get taken to the wing that you're going to spend the night, and then you get some food. Like usually, like you get given some food and you get offered, and this, apparently it's not like this anymore. But back then you would get offered a smoker's pack or a non-smoker's pack. And they take this out of your money because when you're in prison and you work and stuff, like you earn money, but obviously a tiny amount, but they take this out of your future money or whatever. It's like a complicated system. But the smoker's pack has tobacco in it and rolling papers and stuff. And the non-smoker's pack has like 2 bottles of orange juice or something and an apple or something like that. Yeah. And obviously the thing to always take is the smoker's pack, because even if you don't smoke, the tobacco can be used as currency because other people want it. So you can exchange it for much better snacks or whatever. So I took the smoker's pack, of course. Then you get put in a cell and it's always you generally, unless you're a violent prisoner and there's warnings on your record or whatever for sharing cells with people, you get put in a cell with somebody else, and usually it's a cell that was originally, because British prisons are very overcrowded. So in my experience, it was always that you'd get put in a cell that was designed for one person, but it's a bunk bed and there's two of you in there and shit. And then, anyway, and long story short, I got taken back to court the next day. Like, I wrote an amazing letter to the judge telling him how I was a university student studying English literature and I deeply regretted my actions and everything. And he reduced my sentence from 6 months to 3 months. Like, and then I got sent to adult prison, and it's a similar system. You get brought to the prison, and because I got taken to a prison in London, but then when I got sentenced, that prison was locked. What it was called, they've got a lockout this term. They had a lockout, which means that they'd reached overcrowding to a point where they couldn't bring in any more prisoners. So then I got taken to Oxfordshire, which was outside of London in the countryside. I got taken to this prison called Bullingdon, booked in the same system, proper e-search, fingerprinting, you get assigned an ID card, you're sitting in a holding cell with a bunch of other people, but this time you get given prison clothes, your clothes get taken from you, and prison clothes is usually a grey tracksuit and a blue t-shirt, and then you get put in a cell with somebody else. And actually that time I got put into a real 2-man cell, so I had a single bed and the other guy had and that was a real 2-man cell. I was lucky with that, and I was really lucky I had an amazing cellmate. Like, he was an armed robber, and like, he was mad
amazing
cool.
guy.
He was mad cool. And R.I.P. Brutus, because he died later.
R.I.P.
Yeah, but he was like a really good fucking guy, and we became very good friends. And after prison, we still had contact and were good friends. And that's the system basically. And it's like, it's very nerve-wracking as well, because you're like, every step that you're going through, you have no idea what to expect. Older guys who've been through the system, or young guys as well who've been to prison loads of times, they know what to expect. Also, if you're gang affiliated, like, you'll hopefully have friends on the wing, and that's an element I forgot to add as well out of the booking process, which is an important element, is you get pulled to the side, especially if you're a young guy from a big city, like from London or Birmingham or Manchester or whatever. You get pulled to the side at a certain point during the booking process by someone, and they sit you down and they go, what area are you from? And they go, have you got gang affiliations and have you got gang rivalries? And you need to tell us now so that we don't put you on the wing with your enemies, because in prison there's like mad problems with gang shit in it. But the funny thing is when you're on the wing, if you tell the screws, that's what we call the guards, we call them screws. Like, I'm not sure where that slang comes from, but that's a real prison slang. So that's a very good example of a British prison slang, which doesn't exist outside. If you tell the screws you have a problem with something, like, they don't give a fuck. And I remember this actually happened with me, where I got moved from my wing, and I got moved to this wing, and I got put in the cell, and I think I had like 2 weeks left of my sentence. So it was very much towards the end of me doing my sentence. I got moved to this wing, and I get put in the cell with this guy, this Sri Lankan guy, and he like asks me what my sentence was, and I tell him, and I go to him, what's your sentence? And he's like, you don't want to know. He goes, you'll cry if I tell you. And I was like, a bit like, I'll cry if you tell me. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Nah.
But then I was like, nah, bro, what's your sentence? And he goes, 30 years.
30 years?
Yeah, and I was like, bro, what the
For
fuck?
what?
And I was like, for what? And he was like, gang. He just goes, gang war. And then that's it. And I was like, I'm not gonna ask this guy mad questions, because that's like, you don't cross those lines of like, the way you get problems in prison. A lot of the time, people don't realize is the way you get problems is by carrying yourself in the wrong way.
Of course.
So I understood. Okay, let me not ask this guy. And then he went to work, like, because during the day prisoners go to work, but inside the prison, like in a prison workshop. And he'd left and because I was at the end of my sentence, I was on, and in fact, every single time I did a prison sentence, because it was short, I was on what's called 23-hour bang up, which is technically supposed to be a punishment, but they do it to prisoners who have short sentences because they can't be bothered to get prisoners to go to the library or to go to the gym. 23-hour bang up means you're in your cell 23 hours a day. You get 15 minutes in the morning to walk around the exercise yard, and you get 45 minutes in the afternoon to eat, like, but it's during the meal time. So like you get food brought to your cell as well, but you get it at the server and you take it to the cell. But 45 minutes to have a shower and to do what's called association. It's called association, and that's the term for that 45 minutes in the afternoon. You get to mingle with other prisoners. Maybe you play ping pong if you get a goal on the table, whatever. You know, it's like you have some human contact.
Of course.
But like, bro, 23-hour bang up is
mad.
fucking hard. Like when you're doing it for like 2 months or like a month and a half, it's fucking hard. Like I remember I found it very difficult. I did like a 23-hour bang up for a month and a half, but at the same time, it's like, well, I'm exaggerating if I say, I found it very difficult. It's like, it is what it is, isn't it? Like you just have to fucking roll with it and like read books and just whatever, accept your fate, because there's nothing you can change about it, and not be a pussy about it, basically, you know. But what I was gonna say about this guy, so this guy goes to work and he's left on the desk, like there's this little desk in the cell, his papers, and I'm like, fuck it, I need to know like something about who I'm with. So like, but also I want to know that it's like he's not some fucking rapist or some fucked up shit, you get me? Because that's not acceptable to us, innit? And so I looked through his papers and he was involved in some crazy gang war in Wembley with Tamil Tigers. They're guys from Sri Lanka who'd escaped the civil war in Sri Lanka and come to this one bit of northwest London called Wembley. And this guy's gang, in one day, they had like some crazy day where they went and executed one of their rivals. Oh no, first they shot one of their rivals in a drive-by because that guy's gang had shot one of their boys in and executed him, shot him in the head in a park. So then this guy they did the drive-by on these guys, but they didn't kill them. They hit one of them and wounded him, but didn't kill them. So then they went to the guy's house to try and get him, but the guy wasn't there. So the guy who I was in the cell with made that guy's brother get on his knees, and then like in the hallway of the flat in front of the guy's dad and like mum and shit, and executed him, like blew his brains out and shit right there in the hallway. And that's why he was doing 30 years. And then later in the course, because I was reading this article and there was some stuff about how some other guy had his head cut off with a samurai sword and was thrown into a canal. And I'm reading this, I'm like, yo, what the fuck? Like, yo, this is mad. So I go to the screw and I'm like, yo, Gov, because that's like what you often call the screws, or back then at least people, you say, yo, Gov, like, yo, Gov, I've got two weeks left of my sentence, which is for violation of probation. Like I'm here because of violation of probation, nothing else. And you've put me in a cell with a guy who's doing 30 years for murder. Like I don't feel comfortable with that, you get me? And they're like, yeah, all right. And then just ignore me. And I realized suddenly, I was like, oh, this shit doesn't matter. Like they don't give a fuck, innit? Yeah. But actually what ended up happening is this guy was mad cool. I got on with him mad well and shit. The only funny thing was that every night for half an hour, bro, without fail, every night, he would sit on his bunk bed. He had the top bunk, I had the bottom bunk, and he would just read out loud from the Bible, like for half an hour. No, in Tamil. Yeah, but it was the Bible. He would read the Bible for half an hour every night out loud. Like, yeah.
I think he missed the point of the Bible.
I don't know. I think maybe he didn't miss it. I think maybe he was like, realized that, you know, he'd crossed the line and realized he would have to spend every day of the 30 years of the rest of his life, of those 30 years, atoning for his deeds or whatever. I don't know. Yeah, it's mad. It was mad. But yeah, so that's like an example of like the process and the system, innit? Yeah.
Was your defense good? Was your barrister good?
No, he was shit. And like what I remember was he was really shit because he didn't speak up for me, because the thing was, so just to explain, my situation at that point was quite mad, because I was about to do my third and final year of university. This was during the summer, so it was the summer holidays, and I was about to do my third and final year of uni. If I went to prison, I would not have gone to university, and the university would have struck me off, because I would have not attended for so long. I would have missed all those seminars and lectures. I'd be behind with work, so I'd have got struck off. So I said and I thought there was a chance that I was like shook. I was like panicking a bit because I was like, fuck, I'm about to fuck up. So I said to my barrister, I was like, yo, tell the judge, like, you need to tell the judge that I'm at uni and that why haven't, because you're not basically, when you're in court as a defendant, you're not allowed to just speak out and talk to the judge and just say shit for yourself. That's the point of you having a barrister, is that the barrister is your voice in court. Only when you're brought into the witness box, or only when the judge directly addresses you with a question and you have to answer, or you're expected to answer, can you talk. Other than that, you're not allowed to. It's like against the rules and shit. So I'm telling the barrister, I'm like, yo, tell him that I'm about to start my final year of university, and ask him to reduce my sentence. Because if I had gone and done 6 months, like I said, I would have missed all that. And my barrister didn't do shit, yeah. And so what happened is, when I got put on remand, I got sent to Wandsworth prison. And that night in my cell, on prison paper, I wrote this really long letter to the judge that I mentioned. It was really articulate and like eloquent. I remember, like, I'm not fucking exaggerating. I wrote this really eloquent letter to him, to the judge, Your Honor, like, and saying about my regrets, and signed it off. And when I came back for sentencing, the judge starts doing the sentencing, starts preparing the sentence, and says, well, look, I've looked at it, and it's like, there's no alternative for me other than to give you the 6 months, because you clearly did break the terms of your probation, and you didn't make any effort to like make up for it and everything, and blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, to my barrister, I'm like, yo, tell him about that. And my barrister's just standing there like a dickhead, because the problem is, right, is you get barristers who, first of all, if you're paying money for a barrister, you're more likely to get a good barrister. But if you were in a situation like myself, you get what's called, first, a duty solicitor. Duty solicitor means someone that the state provides you, and they're often either very young and inexperienced, or they're very overworked and exhausted, and they just want to close their cases as quickly as possible, so they move on to the next. They sometimes give very bad advice where they tell you to plead guilty when you shouldn't plead guilty, because you could bust case, but they just want to wrap things up as quickly as possible, because sometimes for them it's like, it doesn't hurt their career that their client pled guilty and stuff, you know. And what I had was a barrister representing me from the firm where I'd got the duty solicitor. So he's like a duty barrister. I don't know what the correct term is, but he was provided by, like, he was being paid for by the state. I wasn't paying him, and he was just shit and ineffective. So then, like, when I realized the judge was about to sentence me, before the judge sentences me, I pulled the letter out of my pocket, and I like give it to the barrister. I'm like, yo, I beg you, give the judge this letter now. Like, give it to him now. And he just takes it, walks over to the judge, hands the letter to the judge. The judge reads the letter, and I remember he reads it, and he goes, well, I can clearly tell you're a very articulate and intelligent young man. And then he goes, but you didn't neglect, because I wrote this thing where I said, like, I neglected to do my community service, and I regret that I neglected. He goes, but you didn't neglect. You willfully chose not to, but he did reduce my sentence on the basis of my letter. So obviously my letter worked, but I had a shit barrister, and I've had other barristers. Well, I had one other barrister who was very good and who helped me with my case. But
yeah, that sounds great. Thank you, man. That's like an awesome experience.
Well, it wasn't so much of an awesome experience for me at the time.
Yes,
but it taught me a lot of lessons, and
of course,
life lessons. And
now we can see in some cases we even like talk about the rights of prisoners and the other things, and we don't realize how bad the attitude to people who has found themselves inside this criminal law system, for example, in the other European countries, how bad the attitude to them could be. But speaking about like holding people for 23 hours without any purpose, only because you have like 6 weeks more of your term to serve. Man, this torture.
And that's
considered torture.
That's interesting. Well, it's torture, but then as well, it's like, if you're like, I don't know, a human should be able to, if you can read books, let's say, and you're capable of reading, and you capable of engaging your mind, then you have to just figure out how to hack it. Like, I wrote a lot when I was in prison, and I read a lot of books. But the other thing I wanted to add, actually, because you reminded me of this, the 2 points that I wanted to make, making comparisons. You told me something about this thing about like the welcome reception that guards have for prisoners where they beat them. And you asked me, do they do that in the UK? It's like, no, they don't. Unless I don't know this personally, but maybe if you're a cop killer, or maybe if or you beat up cops or something, maybe they do some special on the side shit to you, which I don't know about, innit? But honestly, there's nothing like that in the British system as an accepted thing. Whereas I guess especially in the Soviet or ex-Soviet system, it was you come to prison and you're just getting beaten by cops as you're welcome, innit? So we don't have that
default.
Yeah, we don't have that level of default brutality. We definitely do not have that level of default brutality. The food is generally, compared to some other countries where I've heard of what prison food is, our food is of a higher standard. Although I remember getting raw chicken, and then you're like, fuck, what do I eat?
Just raw?
Well, no, you get it it's cooked on the outside, and you cut in, and you're like, it's raw, and it's like, fuck that, so I can't eat that. So then you are fucking hungry. But then you can buy food, and there's a whole kind of black market as well. But the other thing I wanted to go to, because you're talking about being kept in a space for a specific amount of time, is this. What I find interesting is the system of when you get arrested. In the UK, when you get arrested, you get taken to what are called police cells, and you get put in a police cell, and you get put in a police cell for potentially 24 hours, but they can keep you up to 72 hours. Of course, they might let you out earlier than 24 hours, but that's if you're really lucky, and either they just decide to drop the charges, or you get seen by a police officer and interviewed really quickly, and then they decide to release you on bail. But generally the system works like this. You get taken to the police cells, and you get put in this cell completely on your own for 24 hours. You have nothing. You're not allowed to have any reading material. You're literally not allowed to have anything. They take the shoelaces out of your shoes. And I remember the first time thinking, why the fuck are they taking the shoelaces out? And they're like, oh, because it's a suicide risk. And I'm like, but I don't want to commit suicide, and I don't have any suicidal tendencies. And then later, I was like, when I spent 24 hours in the cell, I was like, oh, yo, I see someone spending 24 hours in a box, with the lights permanently on. The lights never get switched off, and there's no window, so you can't tell when it's day or night. You lose all sense of time, and you have no watch, and you can't see a clock, so you also don't know how the time is passing. Yo, that shit drives you fucking mad. 24 hours, and especially when you're a young guy, when you're 18 years old, and you're full of fucking energy and shit. And also those times as well, we used to smoke weed morning till night. So if you're not smoking weed, you can't, when you're smoking weed like that so regularly, you can't go to sleep without smoking weed. So you're wide awake for 24 hours, and you're like, what the fuck? And there's just a wooden bench, a toilet in the corner, with a little sink on top of the toilet, and there's this plastic mattress about that thick, and a plastic pillow about that thick, and it's hard, and this kind of weird blanket made out of these weird fibers because it's fireproof. Fireproof and rip-proof. Again, so that you can't tear it and turn it into something that you
you
hang yourself with.
Around your neck.
So that, bro, I found, and once I did 48 hours. I was in a police cell for 48 hours, and bro, that shit is very, to me, unusual punishment. In, it's very extreme, and those ones I'm like, yo, I'd rather be in a room with a bunch of guys. And if I have to, I don't know, of course, because it's difficult, it's always easier to theorize about the alternative. But it's if I have to have one fight just to be cool in that room, I think probably I'd like to do that and just have human contact for 48 hours than to sit in a box for 48 hours where you lose all sense of time. Because the worst thing in that experience is when you think to yourself, 3 hours has gone past, 4 hours has gone past, and maybe a guard comes past your cell, and because sometimes you can ask for water and they'll bring you water, and the guard brings you water, you say you want water, they bring you water, and then you say, what's the time? And they tell you the time, and you realize, 30 minutes has gone past. And you're like, fuck, I've got another 23 and a half hours to go. And you're desperate. You're desperate to be taken out and interviewed. And you know what as well, when I think about it now objectively, perhaps that's also part of their system of softening you up for the interview, so that by the time you're brought in for the interview, you're so fucking defeated by your isolation that maybe you're more open to answering questions. Although I never fucking answered questions. When you get questioned, the code is no comment all the way. That is the fucking code with you. You do never start talking, because especially if it's a case involving your friends or something, if so many people snitch, where I see it's like initially they don't even mean to snitch, but they're trying to save themselves. The police already know information about them, and then they start saying a name, and already as soon as you say the name of your friend in relation to a case, you're already snitching. So what you're supposed to do is no comment all the way, and wait for your lawyer as well. Always, like, the dumbest guys are the guys who are like, nah, I don't need a lawyer. That's like the fucking dumbest people. And often when you get a lawyer, in the beginning, the lawyer will advise you, any decent lawyer will advise you straight away, no comment the whole interview, because the lawyer will say we have to first look at the facts, and the police are not presenting all the facts of what they have to us. And so because we don't know what the police have, we're not going to comment on this. And they'll advise you to do no comment. Yeah. But of course, the police exert as much pressure as possible to psychologically make you think you have to, respond. But yeah, so that was like, I think that's a more, for me, I could introduce you potentially one day in London to some guys who did really serious sentences, and they could tell you some really interesting stuff about the complexity of the prison system and the stages. But I find, in terms of my experience, the interesting element was this fucking like bureaucratic procedure of the police system, where you're in police cells and you're getting taken out and then put back in, and you're just fucking disorientated, and you don't know when you're gonna get released, and it's just very fucking disorientating. And like, it's funny because it's like, when I think back to it, like, I must have been in those police cells, like, I don't know, bro, 20 times in my life or something mad. Yeah, like at least, like, yeah. But fuck it, it's better to be in a police cell for 24 hours than to go to prison, innit?
For 30 years.
Yeah, or even for like a few months.
For homicide.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is the mad experience. Thank you, G. Thank you for talking about this.
No, of course, my guy.
To me. So it was Gabriel Krauze. One time again, subscribe to his Instagram. You will find mad experience, mad new books issued and written by them. And also, please subscribe to my Telegram and to my Instagram. Goodbye. Bye bye. Stay safe. Grrrah.